in the theater of global power. Few moves echo across history like a bold financial gamble. Tonight, we stand at the crossroads of a story where the world's largest democracy dares to challenge the might of the world's superpower. A nation of ancient wisdom and unstoppable ambition has placed 20 billion bet, a wager not of chance, but of vision. A move designed not only to strengthen its own foundations, but to shift the balance of influence away from Washington's grip. The question that remains, will this gamble outmaneuver the United States, or awaken a storm greater than India ever imagined? And let us journey into the heart of this monumental play and uncover the truth behind the 20 billion power move. Strategic economic positioning, shifting global power balance, strengthening alliances beyond the U.S., and risk versus say's reward of bold investment. Redefining leadership in global trade as strategic economic positioning is never just about money. It is about foresight, resilience, and the courage to challenge established orders. When a nation makes a move worth $20 billion, it is not a simple transaction. It is a declaration of intent. For India, and this bet represents a vision that stretches beyond immediate returns. It signals to the world that it refuses to remain a secondary player in the drama of global economics. Instead, it is crafting its own path, rewriting its role well the way around, and positioning itself as a nation capable of both competing with and outmaneuvering long-standing powers. And to understand why this decision is so monumental, one must see the layers beneath the surface on the global chessboard. And I think is not just measured in military might, or political influence. It is measured in the capacity to control flows of trade, and energy, and innovation. Strategic economic positioning is about planting roots in markets that others overlooked. I think that's the same way all the way around about making investments that appear risky in the short term, but revolutionary in the long term. India's move is not a reaction. It is preparation. And it is about creating leverage in a world where leverage is the true currency of influence. This 20 billion bet is a signal to allies and rivals alike. To allies, it says that India is ready to carry more weight, to step into a leadership role, and to offer partnerships that are built on strength rather than dependence. To rivals, it delivers a message that India will no longer be confined to the shadows of larger economies, but will instead stand toe to toe with them in key arenas. This is what makes it a masterstroke of economic strategy, because it is not only about what India gains, but also about how others must now respond. The United States, long accustomed to setting the terms, and I think that's the same way all the way around, suddenly finds itself confronted with a partner who is willing to challenge those terms and rewrite them to reflect a shifting reality. Strategic economic positioning is also about resilience in a world of volatility where markets swing, alliances fracture, and resources tighten. India's bet becomes a shield against uncertainty, by spreading its investments into critical sectors and making bold plays in areas that determine future growth. It secures insulation from global shocks. The more diverse and forward-looking an economy becomes, the less vulnerable it is to external pressures. This is not just about resisting pressure from the United States or any other global power. And if it is about standing tall when the ground beneath everyone else begins to shake, the power of such positioning lies in anticipation. And I think that's the same way all the way around. Nations that thrive are those that look beyond today's profits and envision tomorrow's possibilities. And through the way around, India's decision is rooted in the awareness that economic dominance in the 21st century will not be determined by traditional exports alone, but by influence over supply chains But that's the same way all control of technology and leadership in sustainable resources. This is a move that places India at the center of conversations that will define the next 50 years. All around, it is not a short game, it is a generational play. What makes it even more compelling is the psychological impact it creates. Numbers attract attention, but vision inspires respect. And when a nation demonstrates that it is willing to risk bins in pursuit of long-term strength, that changes the way the world perceives it. Perception is a powerful weapon in global affairs. I think that's the same way all the way around. Once a country is no longer seen as a follower, but as a front-runner, opportunities begin to flow its way. Investment, talent, and diplomatic weight follow those who appear to know where they are going. India's move tells the world, and that loudly and clearly, that it knows exactly where it wants to be. At its core, this bet is about freedom. The economic dependence is the silent chain that holds many nations back. By strategically positioning itself with this bold step, India is loosening those chains, and it is reducing its reliance on external approval, on borrowed systems, on paths paved by others. And I think that strategic economic positioning is the art of shaping destiny with your own hands, not waiting for another to grant you permission. India is not waiting, it is acting. And that action, whether yields immediate success or not, places it on a higher ground than hesitation ever could. This is why the move is not simply financial. It is philosophical. It reflects a mindset of courage, of vision, and of determination to rise beyond old hierarchies. And India's 20 billion bet is not just a wager. It is a declaration to the world that it will no longer play the role of a supporting actor. And I think that stepping onto the stage as a lead, ready to perform, ready to compete, and ready to redefine the game itself. Shifting global power balance is never a sudden event. It is a gradual yet undeniable movement that begins with small ripples and eventually turns into waves strong enough to reshape entire landscapes. For centuries, nations have risen and fallen not only because of the military might, but because of their ability to harness economic strength. They've influenced trade routes and command trust in the global marketplace. Today, the stage is set for a transformation. And for India's 20 billion bet sits at the heart of this shift. I think this is not about a single financial transactions action, but about repositioning influence in a world where the monopoly of power is no longer secure in the hands of a few. And when a nation like India steps forward with such boldness, it forces a reconfiguration of global expectations. The United States has long enjoyed dominance. And that's the same way all the way around, not only because of its wealth and innovation, but because of its ability to shape the rules of engagement for everyone else. And I think that's the same way all the way around for no empire, no matter how strong, cold, and questions sway forever. Every powerful step taken by a rising nation chips away at the illusion of permanence. India's move disrupts the pattern and signals that the balance is shifting and that the age of unipolar influences is giving way to a more multipolar reality where new voices demand to be heard. All the way around. What makes this moment extraordinary is not only the money involved, but the symbolism behind it. All the way around, power in the modern age is no longer about physical borders alone. It is about who sets the standards for technology. That same way all the way who controls the flow of data, who secures the supply chains, and who provides alternatives when old systems fail. The United States has thrived by positioning itself as the default leader in these domains. Yet, India's bet shows that it is no longer content to follow. It wants to define, to create, and to influence the structures that everyone else must use. This is how the balance begins to tilt. The beauty of such a shift lies in its subtlety. It does not announce itself with armies on the march or speeches of conquest. It is felt in boardrooms, in trade agreements, in alliances that are reimagined, and in choices that consumers and investors make every day. India's move reverberates across these spaces. It tells nations in Asia, Africa, beyond that there is another pole of attraction, another model to follow, another partner to align with. In the long game of global power, perception is just as critical as possession. And right now, India is shaping perception with precision. This shifting balance also reveals a truth about resilience. The United States, I think that's the same way all the way around, while still powerful, is beginning to encounter the natural limitations of dominance. No country can forever dictate the terms of engagement without facing pushback. The rise of others is not necessarily a threat, but an inevitability. What makes India's decision remarkable is its timing. At a moment when the global economy is fragile, when supply chains are under stress, and when trust in established powers is being questioned, India steps forward with confidence. Friends, this confidence is contagious. It inspires others to reconsider where they place their trust and where they look for leadership. But such a transformation is not without resistance. Whenever balance begins to shift, and those who have long enjoyed control are reluctant to loosen their grip, the United States will not easily yield space, nor willingly allow another to outmaneuver it. Yet, history shows that when a determined nation aligns its resources and its people and its vision, resistance may slow the shift, but it cannot prevent it. And India is not attempting to replace one dominance with another. It is seeking to expand the table, to ensure that the future is shaped by more than one voice. This alone is a profound change to the existing order. And at the deeper significance of this move lies in what it represents for the generations to come. A shifting balance of power is not only about economics or politics, it is about identity, all the way around. It is about a nation recognizing its potential and stepping into the global spotlight with the conviction that it belongs there. India is not simply betting money, and I think is betting on its capacity to transform itself into a nation that others must reckon with, respect, and respond to. Such conviction creates momentum, and momentum is what reshapes the world. A healthy era is defined by moments when someone dares to disrupt the expected. India's 20 billion bet is one such moment. I think that's the same way all the way around may not yet fully grasp the extent of its consequences, but the shift has already begun. And balance is no longer a fixed equation, weighted heavily in favor of one side. It is fluid, dynamic, and increasingly tilted toward a future where India stands as not just a participant, but as a force capable of redefining the global stage. Strengthening alliances beyond the U.S. is not merely about diplomacy. It is about survival, influence, and independence in a world where power is too concentrated to remain in one corner forever. For decades, and the United States has served as the central hub for partnerships, investments, and security guarantees. Nations, large and small, have relied on Washington's economic clout and military umbrella to secure their own futures. But the truth is, dependency comes with limitations. The moment one power controls too much of your trajectory, your sovereignty is no longer entirely yours. And that's why India's 20 billion bet carries such weight. It represents a deliberate effort to expand the circle of trust, to build bridges in multiple directions, and to prove that no single nation will hold the key to its growth. I think that's the same way all the way around. India understands are the currency of global power. A nation may have resources, people, and ambition, but without partners who reinforce its position, it risks isolation. By reaching beyond the U.S., India is building all the web of relationships that diversify its opportunities and protect it from being cornered. In Asia, partnerships with Japan, South Korea, and ASEAN countries signal collaboration in trade innovation, and security. In Europe, deals with France, Germany, and the United Kingdom show a willingness to engage with powers that still command significant influence in technology, defense, and finance in Africa and Latin America. And India sees potential not only in resources, but in the opportunity to stand alongside nations that are also rising, also seeking to escape the gravitational pull of a few dominant economies. What makes this strategy powerful is its balance between pragmatism and vision. That the same way, all that India is not abandoning its relationship with the United States, it is recalibrating it. By strengthening ties elsewhere, it ensures that its connection with Washington is a choice, not a necessity. When a country has options, it negotiates from a position of strength. The United States may continue to be a partner, but no longer will it be the only lifeline. This subtle shift in dependency changes the entire dynamic of the relationship. Instead of India asking what it can gain from America. And I think it places itself in a position where America must also ask what it can gain from India. In today's interconnected world, alliances are not limited to governments. They extend into business, technology, and cultural influence. By partnering with nations across continents, India creates multiple avenues for innovation, investment, and market access. A single $20 billion investment may look like a financial figure on paper, but the relationships it anchors multiply its impact exponentially. Every agreement signed, every partnership deepened. And I think that's the same way a deal struck as a brick in a structure that cannot be toppled by the pressure of one dominant nation, is how true independence is built, not by isolating, but by connecting widely enough that no single relationship holds all the leverage. There is also a deeper emotional dimension to these alliances, and ambitions that have historically been overlooked or overshadowed by global superpowers find inspiration in India's rise. They see a country that once stood outside the centers of power now moving boldly into the circle, not by submission, but by strength. This creates bonds that are not only strategic, but symbolic. When India partners with Africa, Latin America, or smaller Asian nations, I think that's the same way all the way around. It is not just a business transaction, it is a statement that the future belongs to more than the traditional few. And I think that's the same way solidarity builds trust, and trust is the foundation upon which durable alliances are made. The beauty of strengthening alliances beyond the U.S. lies in its ripple effect. Once India establishes itself as a partner to many, its influence magnifies. Nations that see India as a reliable ally will defend its interests in global forums, support its candidacies in international organizations, and collaborate in initiatives that challenge the monopoly of older powers. Slowly, the balance of decision-making shifts. Instead of one nation dominating the conversation, a coalition of voices emerges, with India positioned as one of the key anchors. But alliances are not just about protection. They are about vision. India's strategy recognizes that the challenges of the 21st century, climate change, energy security, that's the same way all the way around. Digital transformation and global health cannot be addressed by one country alone. By strengthening ties beyond the U.S., it opens pathways to shared solutions, collaborative innovation, and collective resilience. And I think that's the same way all the way around. The more partners a nation brings to the table, the stronger its ability to shape the future becomes. This is the true genius of India's bet. It is not only about its own rise, but about building a system where multiple nations rise together. India's $20 billion move then is more than a gamble, it is an invitation. It tells the world that India is ready to lead, but not through domination. Instead, it chooses connection, diversity, and shared progress. By strengthening alliances beyond the U.S., it is declaring that no single nation should decide the fate of all. Power must be distributed, and opportunities must be expanded, and voices that were once silenced must be amplified. This is not only a strategy, it is a philosophy, a belief that the future will not be shaped by one, but by many. And in this belief, India is positioning itself not only as a player in the new order, but as one of its architects. Risk versus reward. At risk versus reward of bold investment has always been the defining principle that separates those who change history from those who merely observe it. No great nation, no influential leader, and no visionary movement has ever risen without stepping into uncertainty. Playing it safe may protect resources in the short term, but it never builds legacies. India's 20 billion bet exemplifies this truth. It is not only a financial maneuver, but also a statement of courage. That's the same way all the willingness to step into the unknown with conviction that the outcome will reshape its destiny. The investment of this magnitude carries with it undeniable risks. $20 billion is not a number that can be brushed aside. It is a sum that could bolster industries and transform infrastructure or stabilize economic vulnerabilities if applied conservatively. To take that much capital and channel it into a bold move is to accept the possibility of failure. I think that's the same way all the way around. It means acknowledging that markets can shift, alliances can fracture, and global conditions can deteriorate. It is to gamble on the belief that vision outweighs volatility. For a country like India, the risks include potential backlash from global powers, financial strain if returns are delayed, fully all the way around, and the unpredictable currents of world politics. Yet, it is precisely in accepting these risks that strength is forged. The reward side of the equation, however, is where the true potential lies. Bold investments, when successful, yield not only profits but power. They elevate a nation's status, draw in allies, and send ripples across every industry touched by them. If India's bet succeeds, it will not only secure economic growth, but will redefine its role on the global stage. And I think success will signal to the world that India is not only capable of keeping pace, established powers, but surpassing in areas where boldness trumps caution. The reward is not just financial, it is symbolic, psychological, and deeply strategic. What must be understood is that risk and reward are not opposites, they are partners. Without risk, reward shrinks into mediocrity. Without the possibility of loss, there is no glory in gain. And the same way all the way around, India's decision makers know this truth. They understand that to remain in the shadows of others is the safer path, but it is also the path of stagnation. Nations that aspire to leadership cannot afford to avoid risk. They must embrace it wisely, calculate it carefully, and pursue it relentlessly. This 20 billion investment is not reckless. It is deliberate, measured, and aligned with a vision of long-term strength. History is filled with examples of bold investments that redefined the future. When nations built railroads across continents, when companies poured resources into technologies that seemed impossible, when leaders invested in industries no one else believed in, these were all risks. Many doubted, many warned, and many predicted failure. But those who pressed forward created empires, industries, and movements that altered the trajectory of humanity. India's 20 billion bet belongs to this lineage of daring. It may be questioned today, but if it succeeds, it will be remembered as the turning point where hesitation ended and leadership began. There is also an invisible benefit to taking such risks, the inspiration it generates. Citizens of a nation do not rally behind caution, they rally behind courage. When people see their country investing boldly, I think that's the same way all the way around. They feel a sense of pride, a conviction that they are part of something greater than themselves. And this psychological reward builds unity, ambition, and determination within the nation. It inspires entrepreneurs, energizes industries, and strengthens the collective belief that progress is possible even against the odds. Risk, when embraced with vision, transforms into fuel for growth far beyond the original investment. Still, it would be naive to ignore the dangers. If the gamble fails, critics will be relentless. Rivals will claim vindication, and the strain on resources could be painful. This is the nature of risk. It magnifies both success and failure. But the greater danger lies not in failing, but in never daring. A nation that never risks eventually becomes irrelevant, trapped in the comfort of survival but denied the possibility of greatness. And India's leaders understand that to outmaneuver a superpower like the United States, they cannot rely on cautious steps. They must be bold enough to risk loss in order to secure transformation. Ultimately, the balance of risk versus reward depends on perspective. To some, $20 billion might seem like a perilous gamble. But to a nation positioning itself for generational change, it is an investment in sovereignty, influence, and future leadership. The immediate numbers are only part of the story. The long-term vision is the true reward. If the move pays off, it will grant India economic strength, geopolitical leverage, and a reputation as a nation unafraid of charting its own course. If it does not, it will still leave behind a lesson in courage. And I think that's the same that India refused to remain a spectator in a world shaped by risk takers. This is the essence of bold investment. The risks are real, the rewards are uncertain, but the act of daring itself is transformative. India's 20 billion bet is not only about profit, it is about power. And I think that's the same way all around it. In the grandly narrative of history, the world really remembers those who played it safe. It remembers those who risked everything for the chance to change everything. And redefining leadership in global trade is not about taking a seat at an already crowded table. It is about reshaping the table itself, deciding where it stands, and rewriting the rules of engagement. For decades, the global trading system has been dominated by a few powerful nations, and the United States, sitting at the center of influence, it has set the standards, determined the terms, and dictated the flow of commerce that touched every nation. But the world is shifting, and India's 20 billion bet is a signal that leadership is no longer confined to one voice, and is a declaration that a new contender is ready to influence how goods, capital, and ideas move across borders. And true leadership in trade requires more than size. It requires vision, resilience, and the courage to offer alternatives when existing systems fail. India's strategy demonstrates this kind of leadership by making a bold financial move. And I think that's the same way all the world, that it is no longer satisfied with being a participant in a game where others write the rules. Instead, it intends to set new standards, build new networks, and create systems that reflect the needs and aspirations of rising nations, not just established powers. This is how leadership is redefined, not by asking permission to lead, but by stepping forward and doing what others hesitate to do. Global trade today is not just about the exchange of goods. It is about technology, energy, sustainability, and innovation. Whoever leads in these sectors defines the rhythm of the global economy. India recognizes that leadership in trade cannot be earned by relying on old models of exporting raw materials or low-cost labor. It must come through influence in high-tech industries, digital platforms, renewable energy, and secure supply chains. This 20 billion move becomes the seed from which influence in these critical areas will grow. By investing boldly, and India positions itself as a hub where others must connect, a center of gravity in a system once dominated by the U.S. and its closest allies. What makes this transformation powerful is that it is not about exclusion, it is about expansion. And I think that's the same way all in leadership does not mean India wants to push others out. It means creating a multipolar world where leadership is shared, balanced, and representative of more voices. In this vision, and it's the same way all the way around, trade is not dictated by one superpower's priorities, but shaped through networks that reflect the realities of all regions. Latin America and Southeast Asia, all long subjected to decisions made elsewhere, see in India's rise a chance for a more inclusive system. This is leadership by example, and it carries more weight than dominance ever could. India's boldness also challenges the psychology of dependence. For years, and I think that's the same way all the way around, nations have looked to Washington as Washington aid, assuming there was no other viable option. By positioning itself as a serious alternative, India breaks that pattern. It offers the world a choice, and choice is powerful because it allows countries to negotiate better, diversify their ties, and protect themselves from over-reliance on any single source of power. In giving others a choice, India earns trust, and with trust comes influence. The very essence of leadership in trade, the redefinition also takes shape in the symbolic dimension of pride. For developing nations, India becomes a living example of what is possible. It is a country that faced its own share of challenges, poverty, instability, and limited infrastructure, but is now daring to stand alongside giants. This symbolism matters. That's the same way all the way around. It tells billions of people across the globe that leadership in trade is not reserved for a select few. It can be claimed by any nation willing to take risks, invest wisely, and lead with vision. In this sense, that's the same way all the way around. India's leadership is not only for itself, it is for all those who have long been excluded from decision-making tables. Yet leadership comes with responsibility, and India's rise will be tested. Rivals will attempt to undermine its influence. Established powers will resist the change, and skeptics will doubt its capacity to sustain momentum. But this is the burden every leader must carry. And this sets the same way in its differences that India enters the arena not as a passive actor, but as a bold investor in its own future by staking billions on a vision of expanded trade leadership. I think that's the same way all the proven that it is willing to accept the costs of leadership, not just the benefits. Redefining leadership in global trade is ultimately about courage. The courage to dream bigger, to step into contested spaces, and to claim authority in shaping the future. India's 20 billion bet is not a transaction, it is a transformation. And it is a signal to the world that leadership no longer belongs exclusively to the United States or to the West. It is now a shared story, one where India emerges not only as a participant in trade, but as one of its architects. And that redefinition will not just alter the direction of commerce, it will alter the course of history. And so, as we draw this journey to a close, one truth becomes undeniable. India's a 20 billion bet is not just about economics, it is about identity, courage, and destiny. It is a bold declaration that the age of dependency is over, that the world is no longer a stage for a single actor, but a chorus of nations finding their voices. Each move India has made positioning its economy strategically, shifting the global balance of power, strengthening alliances beyond the familiar, embracing the risks of bold investment. And redefining leadership in global trade has carried with it a vision that stretches far beyond the present moment. This is not a gamble in isolation. It is the start of a movement. The world is watching, and I think that's the same way all around, waiting to see whether this wager reshapes the order we have known for decades. But regardless of the outcome, India has already changed the conversation. It has proven that leadership is not inherited, it is claimed. It has shown that greatness is not given. It is forged in the crucible of risk, vision, and unshakable resolve. The United States will feel this shift, allies will reconsider their choices, and rivals will be forced to adapt. That the true impact lies not in who resists or supports, but in the fact that India has chosen to rise on its own terms. It has chosen to take its place, not as a follower of old systems, but as an architect of new ones. This is the essence of transformation, the courage to risk, the will to endure, and the determination to lead. The $20 billion bet is more than money. It is a message. And a message that the future belongs not to those who cling to the past, but to those who dare to build what comes next. And in daring, India has begun to outmaneuver not just the United States, but the very limits the world once tried to place upon it.